Welcome to all of you joining for this afternoon's TPC webinar. Let's be brackets even more like airlines with Cara Parkinson from Audience View. Have to say, taking a really good piece of content from the conference season last year, which we'll explain in a minute. We'll be underway shortly. Just a quick note coming up tomorrow, 3 o'clock tomorrow, a bit later than usual because we've got some guests from the US joining us. Karen and Tom are talking no benefits, no problem, talking about solving customer service issues. Couple of good case studies on this one about when we're not able to give those benefits to members. And then a trio of project managers, Elisa, Darren and Tony, with their project management tips during lockdown. That's Thursday, 2 o'clock. But we'll be underway very shortly with Cara and a surprise special guest in Let's Be Even More Like Airlines in a couple of minutes' time. Okay, so I think we'll make a start. It's just after 2 o'clock in the UK, just after 9 o'clock in the morning, somewhere in the wilderness in Ontario, Canada, for this afternoon's session. Let's Be Even More Like Airlines, hosted primarily by Cara Parkinson at Audience View. A bit of housekeeping. We'll be about 45 to 60 minutes today. We are recording and we'll make the session available on demand and on our YouTube channel from later on. That's Cara down there. That's me, Andrew Thomas from Ticking Professionals Conference. And today, I think number 18 in the series, this one is. Pretty exhausting business, but I finally get to host a little bit of content too. So the format today, we're going to have a bit of a set the scene, which will be me talking about a piece of content I did last year on the conference circuit called Let's Be More Like Airlines. Cara's got a really interesting presentation that's kind of built off of that, which she'll explain in a second, and then we'll head into a Q&A. So we'll be about 45 minutes, then 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. If you haven't used Zoom Q&A, towards the top or the bottom of your screen, you'll find a toolbar. There's a Q&A button in there. If you hit that, you can ask a question, you can give a thumbs up to other questions, or give comments as well. So we will shortly switch over presentations. So Cara will flick over where she is onto her presentation, and we will make a start.
There we go.
Look at that. It worked. The 3 times we practiced that, it was never as smooth as that. So
practice makes perfect, Andrew.
It does. Welcome, Cara. Thank you for getting up and being caffeinated this early in the morning for you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So these first few slides are slides from my presentation last year I did with a number of colleagues on the kind of international ticketing conference circuit. I did it in INTIX, Ticketing Professionals UK, Ticketing Professionals Australia, and a number of user conferences, including AV Connect in Toronto last June. And it was called Let's Be More Like Airlines. And is the clicking working? Let's have a look. It's going to work now. I'm sure it's going to work. Let's click on that one. Yes. So there was cognitive voices on this, and I presented this piece a number of times with some colleagues of mine, Alan, who's out of Vancouver in Canada, and Rachel Easton from the UK. And the 3 of us kind of picked apart ideas from the airline industry that we thought could possibly translate well into the entertainment sector that we find ourselves in. I was looking at kind of customer experience and the value of that. Alan looking at how we check people in, which is oddly enough now becoming very important, and Rachel looking at revenue. And the fundamental question we asked was, oh, I've clicked around the wrong place. somewhere. What would your venue air look like if your venue was an airline, and in this case it was audience view? What would your venue air look like? You know, what would you offer that the airlines actually offer? So you ask, are we really like airlines? And often we get this conversation happening because it's normally about pricing. Why don't we have pricing like EasyJet? And we've all heard that as a piece of rebuttal or enthusiasm for dynamic pricing. So are we really like airlines? So let's have a look. I click there, let's have a look. Yes, so if you think about when you book an airline ticket, you do some form of research. You look at routes, you look at prices, you look at carriers. At some stage, you'll then go and book it, which is the process of handing over money in return for a confirmation email. Pretty close to the flight time, 24 hours before, you have to perform some kind of check-in. You have to drop everything and give your undivided attention to the airline. You go through scanning and the departure phase. We got used to bag checks, but we're going to have other scanning probably coming up as well. And then we go on the journey. We sit in a seat and look at something happening out the window. So if we look at kind of technology and behavior underneath that, well, actually the airlines have been pretty good at using things like Skyscanner. It's a flight search tool, mainly in Europe, Kayak, other kind of ones in North America. We've looked at, the booking. So even though Google Flights offers a search tool like Skyscanner, it has one-click booking. And Expedia and others have that as well. So we're booking through third parties and affiliates. Check-in's a really interesting one because no matter who you fly with and from whichever airport, the check-in process is pretty similar. It is drop everything 2 to 24 hours before, head to a website, put some details in, click, 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 be sold some stuff, and then you're good to go. Of course, departure, we have things like people paying extra or being granted priority to jump the queue, or maybe board the aircraft first. And for years, obviously, depending on how much you pay, you're either in the green, red, yellow, or blue seats. So let's look at what we do. If we align that with entertainment, and you look at something like TICX, which for those of you who haven't heard of it, a ticketing entertainment search engine, not really a retailer, but aggregating all the tickets that are available there. You can search comedy within Manchester, under £10, it finds it. If you think about booking, I get a lot of press releases. I was recently told of a system where you could book tickets through Snapchat. No idea what Snapchat is. All I know is it's something the Kardashians use. I don't know what the Kardashians is, but hey. And then you've got things like NIMAX theatres in London. I think I previously had a deal with American Airlines whereby American Airlines kind of cross-promoted their NIMAX tickets, and Ryanair, budget airline in Europe, sells tickets to anywhere you're flying as well. The check-in process in the US, we've seen thumbprints into baseball stadiums, the Dutch Football League in Europe using your face as your season ticket. And then interestingly along here, looks like an airport. That's actually at Wales Millennium Centre, not far from me in South Wales in Cardiff, in the UK. That's a sizing gauge. If your bag doesn't go in, it doesn't go in the auditorium. So again, things that we really see at an airline or an airport, we're seeing in our venues. And for years in theatre and in sport, we've divided people and given them the best views, the most legroom, based on how much they're going to pay. So actually, I'm going to argue we already are like airlines, and that's kind of what we talked about last year. But before we get on to some new ideas from Cara, some 3 things I really want to press home, which is in the example she's about to give now, you must apply these 3 memorable and really easy to remember acronyms. WAD2AV, which is we are already doing this at our venue. Great, I know I can see the attendee list here. There's lots of people doing some smart stuff at venues. I know not everything we look at today is going to be new thinking to you. Some venues are ahead of us. In WAVABO, which is also another catchy one, which stands, I've got to remember this now, it would not work at our venue because of. So if Cara's going to be talking about cafe and concessions and how we serve interval drinks, and you don't have an interval or you don't have serve food and beverage, just let that one go. Again, not all of these would work for every single kind of venue. and bois, BWA, but what about? And in my work as a consultant, when I'm not presenting back-to-back webinars for 4 weeks, God help me, but what about? And I think, I love hearing the phrase, but what about? Because when you ask, but what about, with an idea, it shows your thinking. Could I take this idea? Could I cultivate it? Could I expand on it or contract on it to make sure or to work out if it's going to be of benefit to my business? So as Kara's takes us through what she's going to take us through next, just remember those and focus on that last one, but what about, and how you could possibly take some of these ideas and really help in your business going forward. So, as he coughs to death, without further ado, over to Cara.
Thank you. I'm going to see if I do this properly this time and take back control.
You have.
Woohoo! And I'm moving my notes over here so I don't forget what I was going to say to you all. Thank you. So let me tell you a little bit about me. For the people saying, okay, wait, who is this? So as Andrew said, my name is Cara Parkinson. I work at Audience View. I'm Senior Director of Marketing at Audience View. If you aren't familiar with us as an organization, we have about 9,000 live entertainment venues where we're helping them get their events discovered, attended, and remembered with our software products and our consumer communities. So the consumer products that we have in our ecosystem are What's on Stage and Theater Mania. So why am I doing this? Where did this idea really come from? I wanted to show you this picture. It's my husband and I on a flight. And yes, we are watching curling. We were streaming curling because that is just how cool that we are. During the week of March, something with double-digit-ish, I was on my way back from Florida. It was far enough into an awareness of COVID-19 that I had brought some Clorox wipes to clean off the tables and the armrests. And half of the people on the plane were looking at us like we were crazy, and the other half was asking us if we had any extra wipes they can use. The flight crew were just starting to react. They were wearing gloves, but only one was wearing a mask. But it got me thinking. It made me wonder what the future was going to be like. And that phrase, that title of the session that Andrew and his friends had done, his colleagues had done, this whole idea of being more like airlines. So being a business marketer, I wrote a blog post because that's what we do, because SEO. To be honest, I was a little nervous about Andrew's potential reaction. I was hoping he would see it as the homage that it was and wouldn't just think of it as pure plagiarism. And I put it out into the world. And, Andrew teased me a little bit on Twitter about stealing his idea, but he suggested that we bring this together and share these ideas with all of you. But you guys are intimidating. I've been with Audience View for 3 years. To be honest with you, prior to joining Audience View 3 years ago, I didn't really have a top of mind awareness of ticketing as an industry. I approached this as a consumer, but I have been a marketer for 20 years. So when marketers are worried about saying the wrong things, we go to research. So when Andrew and I first started talking, our team at Theater Mania and What's on Stage, we started talking about this audience that they have of passionate theater fans. We put out a survey. We actually sent out the survey to about 1.5 million people. We didn't give them a whole lot of time to get back to us because we were working on a deadline, but we did hear back from more than 5,300 people. So also, I love talking to our clients. I also did some interviews to try to make sure that I had some additional context around what this data we were seeing. Did all this because I love data. That's who marketers are. So one of the foundational questions we asked was really about understanding what elements of theater are making these passionate theater fans uncomfortable. And this is what they came back to us with. So the least comfortable, that big blue bar, they were most uncomfortable with the whole idea of arrivals and departures, i.e. spending that time in the crowded lobby. Exiting and entering the seats where you're passing right by people, the most uncomfortable for them was sitting beside a stranger. Then less so looking at things like food and beverage service, coat check lines, and waiting in lines for the washrooms. The coat check lines, I thought that would be higher, but that might also be because I'm a Canadian girl and I go to theater in the winter, and there are big long lineups for the coat check there. Let's talk about arrivals and departures. Most airlines right now, what they're doing is they're boarding by rows. This is a potential for seating, although I think with as much trouble as we have getting patrons to arrive on time now, having specific seating times or orders is going to be really, really challenging. This row by row concept might make a little bit more sense where you can have your ushers control it. So the visual, the image I've always had in my mind thinking about that is when you go to a wedding, I don't know if that's a Canadian thing or not, where the ushers go down the aisles and they make sure that the people in the back row exit first and they control that. Or even just the opposite, the deplaning, leaving the plane, exiting row by row, where the people in the front rows leave first. Another option is this whole idea of random seating. There was a 2014 study just after the Ebola breakout where the research went into this idea of this random seating, and they believe that this was the most effective in terms of getting people in and keeping people space managed. With the challenge we have getting people to arrive on time, this still may be tough for us. This other option is this whole idea of a designated entrance or a separate entrance. What that can do is provides us some space and some crowd management. This is actually a methodology being deployed, being used by one of our clients that I ended up talking to, a venue called Barrington Stage Company, which is in the US. So Barrington, what they had done is they have designated entrance based on where you are sitting in the theater. So when their patrons purchase their tickets, they also get the information sent out to them, explaining to them which entrance they're going to be using to get into the venue. And what that did is allowed for more space, less crowding in their lobby, which I thought was a really, really smart option for them. Now, we did ask our audience, we asked on our survey, these different options that we were tossing around made most sense to these theater patrons and which ones made them most comfortable. So if I use the concept of the top two box, we gave them, a scale from 1 to 5, as you saw in the last, which makes you least comfortable, which makes you the most comfortable. In that top two box, so either a 4 or a 5 out of 5, using these side entries was the most preferred. So that was 67% of the people who responded said they preferred that number, either 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5. They thought the side entries were a good solution for them. Entering or exiting by row was the next highest. It was just under 61. And then this whole idea of having staggered entry times actually still had just under a 61 top two box score, just slightly behind the enter or exit by row. The next is this whole idea of cleanliness. When you look at airlines, I was fascinated when I was doing this research for this blog article that I wrote, actually an annual award for the cleanest airlines. And the airlines put a great deal of fuss out about this. They generate a lot of publicity for themselves talking about being the cleanest airline. And you think about it, as we travel, you always have this feeling that you're in some sort of petri dish, that it's, you're in such close quarters with such a long time with people you don't know. So there's an annual award for cleanliness. Air Canada, so pick the Canadian one, but I did it for a reason. Air Canada actually won this for North America in 2019. And they have been one of the first airlines to come out with a comprehensive cleaning plan and a comprehensive coronavirus management program they're calling Clean Care Plus. If you go onto the Air Canada website, you look up this Clean Care Plus, you can see the very great detail in which they're explaining all of their cleaning and safety procedures. What I love about this and how we can apply this to ourselves is the amount of thought that they put into making sure people understand every detail, every element of how they're making their experience with that airline safe. So they explain how they're cleaning each of the points of contact. In this picture that I have in the bottom right, they talk about the fact that they're, how they're managing food and beverage. They're just handing out bottled water. Every person is getting a safety pack that includes hand sanitizer. So it's very, very clear, because they've published it, they've made this so apparent what they're doing, that they have put that thought into it. And I think that adds a lot of confidence for the people, for their attendees, their patrons, their customers, to feel comfortable about going on their flights. So what does this look like for us in live entertainment and in theater? Barrington Stage, again, a very similar thing where they've talked about what they're doing, how they're cleaning, how they're sanitizing. and the types of cleaning tools that they're using. They've talked about a physical change they've made in their venue as well. They've upgraded their air ventilation system. And I think this is a really great, you can see the exact text of what they've put on their website here. I love that they've explained, how it's going to help them, and shows what this fresh versus recirculated air goes to. So they're making this fact-based, which lends confidence. I thought this was really interesting too, this article, this company who is using drones to clean theaters, and they talk about it being really safe for the venues. There's a ton of other things that airlines are doing as well. I didn't end up putting them all in. There's Air Canada as another, to pick on them again, are taking everybody's temperature as they go in. There's there's air where they're actually disinfecting people. They have sprays and they have UV-based disinfecting, and they're cleaning every surface. So how important is this to theater patrons? We asked them how important is it to you that you know in advance what the cleaning procedures are. And more than half rated it a 9 or a 10 out of 10. I broke this down into these groups because it's an old software marketer habit of net promoter score. But if you look at rating it 7 and above, it's 73%, 73.5% of people who are saying this is incredibly important to me. So I think this is a really good indicator for us of the value of doing this and making sure that we're communicating our cleaning procedures in advance. Okay, let's talk about washrooms. How about that loo line? That was one of the next things that were an area of big concern for your theater patrons. So behind, the entering and sitting beside strangers. So this whole idea of shared spaces. So there are airlines who are coming out with their solutions in addition to outside of the cleaning. I'm not really sure this one is going to fly. This got a lot of press, and I was really fascinated by this idea of having to ask permission to use the toilets on the airlines. There are some options as well. So if I go back to Barrington Stage, what they had decided to do was perform their shows without intermissions, because what that did for them is that minimized the lines going into the restrooms. The other thing that they did is they're not selling food and beverage, because the more people eat and drink, the more that they're going to need to go to the washroom. One thing that I had proposed when I wrote my blog was this whole idea of having more intervals, having more intermissions in your show. My theory behind that was, if you have multiple intermissions, then people will be able to space out when they're going to the washroom in the breaks in the show. So I wanted to see, do you want to see what the audience thought of my idea? They hated it. So if you, the top 2 box, going back to that measure again, the top 2 box for incremental intermissions was only 26%. Of everything that we put towards our audience, this was by far the least favorite of any of our ideas. There's another one that was close, but I will come back to that one. We asked about this idea of temporary washrooms. And the top 2 box on that was 49%. So it was actually a pretty, in all of the concepts that we put forward, this one was actually not that badly accepted, which says that they like the idea of a porta potty better than my crazy idea of incremental intermissions. So again, this is reinforcing why marketers go back to research, because I am not always. Talk about seating. This is a big one for us. So going to airlines, they are looking at all kinds of creative solutions for seating solutions. This backwards seat thing I thought was very interesting. Obviously, that's not going to work for us in the industry that we're in. This idea of putting plexiglass around the airline seats. I can't see how that can be cost effective, but they are, for the most part, really broadly across the airlines, they are doing a lot of what we are doing in our industry as well, is this whole idea of blocking off seats. And making only certain seats available for the patrons to book. So how are theaters going at this? Our clients, again, I mentioned we have about 9,000 venues we're working with. I've talked to a bunch of them, and we're hearing from our customer success teams what they're doing. There's a lot of creative ideas of what these theaters are doing. So I'm showing you 2 here. Both Barrington and Tobin Center actually physically removed Barrington pulled them out. They literally unscrewed them from the floor and pulled them out of the venue. Tobin Center, if you haven't seen the video, I recommend you go check it out. It's really cool. Google this video. They have a computerized system that allows them, that enables them to reconfigure the seats. So they can, the seats actually go in under the floor, which I think is absolutely fascinating. Don't think that's something that most venues are gonna be able to retrofit. But you know, this whole idea of making sure that you're blocking off seats, making sure these seats are separated. This is something we're seeing really consistently across our customer base. Another thing that Barrington is doing is they're allowing people to only book in groups of 1 or 2 online. Any other booking groups, if it's more than 2, they actually have to go through their box office, which I thought was really interesting. I think if somebody had time, I think it would be really fascinating to go and do that research and say, what percentage of your audiences over time are consistently booking 2, 3, 4, and I would think that it's barely consistent across your shows. This is going to continue to be a challenge for us, obviously, but because of the reduced capacity, the reduced revenue we're going to be getting from having to make these sacrifices in the short term, we wanted to ask theater patrons how this might impact them, and specifically, would they be willing to pay more to help offset this impact? So we asked them, if theaters had to increase their ticket prices to offset the lost revenue from empty seats, how much extra would you be willing to pay? Almost without exception, almost 75%, 73% of the patrons who service said yes, they would be willing to pay more to offset this. There is a variation. For the most part, it's in that 10 to 25% range. I think that'll be challenging for a lot of our venues to be able to do that, but there is willingness with these theater patrons. Another 8% saying 26 to 50% more, and there is a portion saying that they're willing to pay up to 100% more or more than double. In terms of general regulations, so there are industry-wide practices that have been published for the airlines from the International Air Transportation Association. And I want to talk about, having basic principles and basic consistency across our venues. So some standard operating procedures. This whole idea of not having cash. I think we all have an opportunity to do some pre-ordering. What this might manifest as is patrons pre-ordering their food and drinks, pre-ordering their parking, paying for their souvenirs when they buy their tickets. This is assuming that you're going to have food and beverage service at your venue. Having hand sanitizers and masks. This one was actually the most favorably received of all of our ideas in our survey. So this was a 77. There is definite openness with the patrons to be wearing masks to allow them to be able to go back to the show and to have that sanitizer everywhere. We also asked them about digital only tickets. This actually was our 3rd lowest ranked offering. They didn't love that. I would imagine there is some desire to have souvenirs of tickets, or maybe there's concern about fraud. I don't know how much this is going to be an option for us, but I wanted to make sure you knew what that feedback was from the patrons. There is something that was really interesting to me, really surprised me. This whole idea of digital only programs. The idea of digital only programs actually rank lower than the idea of having temporary washrooms. Clearly theater patrons love their programs. Again, with safety, having the physical touch, as CDC and World Health Organization recommendations evolve, this idea of physically touch the same things as people may adjust. It seems like they may be adjusting their thinking on that, but it was a really interesting perspective to me. So while we're all figuring this all out, what I would say is I think there's an opportunity for us to learn from anyone, from any venue, from any country, from any industry, as they continue to open up first. I think it's really important for us to keep listening to our audiences about what is going to work best for them, and making sure that we're making our decisions in a very audience-centric way. So full survey results, I shared a couple data points with you. Obviously, there's a lot more in that survey. If you're interested in that data, come check us out. If you go to audience3.com/unobstructed, you can see the pieces of information, the content that we put out at this point, the interviews that we've done. You can sign up for our newsletter there. And I would also say follow Audience View on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we'll be sharing once the survey results are ready to publish. So I snuck the data out pretty early. We're going to be publishing that within the next couple of weeks, and we'd love to share that with all of you. So thank you.
Look at that, bang on time. Unlike most airlines I travel with. There we go. So I'll just take back the screen there, Carl. Thank you very much for that. And it's nice to see that as, you know, an advancement of the idea of not just copying the airlines, but of actually looking outside. And that's what I was trying to do in my piece last year with the others, is trying to look outside the obvious. So thanks a lot for that. The Q&A is open. They're coming in pretty thick and fast from people from in the UK. I can see people from the East Coast, even very early in the morning for Eric Fuller over in California. I can see he's on here as well. So if you want to get your Q&A in, please do that and give a thumbs up to other questions that you like, and I'll go to the top of the pile. I've got a couple here, as is my right as a co-presenter and, dare I say, kind of co-author of this. I've got this thing here about cleaning, and do you think that we'll actually get cleaning will actually make it into marketing copy? I think it will. I think it should. You know, I think there's an opportunity for us to communicate that via our websites in advance. I think that'd be a really interesting thing if you have space in your tickets or in your pre-show emails to share information on it. I think this is really top of mind for the patrons right now. So yeah, I think it could, and I think it should. Excellent, excellent. Right, let's go to the Q&A. We always ignore the top ranked person, so sorry, Leon, we'll ignore you for now. And I'm actually going to go straight to the bottom of the pile here. There's one from Anonymous. It says, was the survey US based? It was, actually, and now we'd like to follow this up with the What's on Stage audience, but we sent this initially to our Theatre Mania audience. So sorry about that, UK guys. That's fine. I guess we'll have to give him a platform now. So we'll go to Leon, all the way up there in Aberdeen, in Scotland. Don't you think that simply raising ticket prices in response to the enforced reduction in capacity simply increases the perception of theatre being elitist? How can we continue to encourage diversity in our audiences and offer value to those who can't afford those top prices? Great question. What about that one? You know, a bunch of the clients that I've talked to, I think there's an opportunity for mix, and this isn't going to be a great answer for every venue, because it really depends on the type of shows and what you've been presenting. But we have clients who are, focusing on having a type of offerings. So having one-person shows, having smaller concerts, having leveraging local talent, bring your local talent in and highlight them. So having a mix of smaller shows that have a lower cost that you're able to, charge less for, having a mix of prices, obviously, in the venue. But I think there's going to be a lot of testing and learning, to be frank with you. I think we need to, I think there's a real opportunity, this whole concept of dynamic pricing, whether that's the fully automated dynamic pricing that you might get from a third-party vendor, or continuing to test your prices up and down. I think it's going to be really important for us in order to understand what the audience will bear. So, what people say they'll do and what they'll actually do don't always match. The audience, that we surveyed said, yes, they'd be willing to pay more. When it actually goes to life. But I think I think we're going to need to get creative about the mix of shows we're presenting, the cost associated with them. Again, I feel like I'm going back to Barrington, but I feel like they're quite a ways in advance of what different venues are doing. And they're doing shows with really simple, they have really simplified stages and really simplified shows with a single person to try to keep those costs down. And maybe that's a way that we can help offset these, balance that cost of tickets with the cost of the show. Okay, thanks. Q&A is going up tremendously well. We've got eight in the queue. So if you're going to ask a question, have a read through and give a thumbs up, as well as asking your own question, please. Right, Robert Sampson's next. He's top of the pile. Good question, Robert. What are the mindsets towards making sure revenues are maintained from merchandise and F&B sales when we're trying to move people through side entrances and timed entries? I mean, it's a really good question that if we're going to cut down on capacity and have extra costs because of cleaning and masks and screens and everything else, how on earth are we going to balance the books? Because I know so many venues that are reliant on that F&B.
That's a really, really good question that I'm not sure. I don't know what the best answer is. I mean, I've seen venues, I've talked to venues who are doing in-seat delivery of food and beverage. So if you picture sporting events doing this more so than theater in general, but maybe that's the way that we have to handle it, is have multiple local stations so we can still sell it. Now that could potentially offset that whole idea of trying to minimize lineups in the washrooms and the restrooms.
I was on I was on an INTIX webinar a couple of weeks ago. For those who don't know, International Ticketing Association, intix.org. They do some great webinars on that forum. And I remember someone was saying that they were talking about food and beverage that you pre-order, has to be pre-ordered, and there'd almost be a line of kind of sippy cups, with a sealed straw, and you go along to the P, find your order, pick it up, and then consume it within your seat. I suppose. I think going to that pre-order is the only way we can do it. And obviously, merchandise, order at seat and get delivered DHL or FedEx to you. I think that's the way that I can see that working. Anonymous, how could you help to reduce audience queuing and to keep social distancing when entering an auditorium? Well, I think you covered that a little bit, didn't you, in the Barrington example of giving people
a few different clients where they're opening their doors earlier to allow people more time to arrive, spreading out that time, giving them those specific doors. That's what I'm hearing right now from the audience, from the client. From the clients, what they're doing is it's really about time and giving them more time to get to their seats. But I think it's going to be test and learn as we go into this, whether that habit of people arriving at the last minute will change.
Yeah, and I think also, but you've got people who want to limit their dwell time. I want to go and see, I want to go to the theatre, but I only want to be there for the performance and then get out of that petri dish. So, I think as much as we open up with different boarding times or seating times, perhaps we're still going to have like we do now, have a charge towards the end. Okay, hello, Peter Ianson, another INTIX board member. Airlines say they can't cover costs with socially distanced seating, just as most theatres did. Did you ask any questions about how people would be feeling without masks or without distancing? So that as we were.
I did ask that question. Ooh. And now I'm torn whether to make you wait until we publish the results or not.
Nick is watching, so Nick can help you. I can see he's on here, so he's going to be rude if you give all his stories away.
It was, Peter, to answer your question. I can't do the math in my head I got the actual results directly from the survey software right in front of me. It was a very high level of concern. So would you feel comfortable going to the theater without social distancing measures, vaccine, testing? 60% rated it a 1 out of 10. Would you feel comfortable without, with social distancing measures? So the masks, etc., did become more favorable, but there is still a level of discomfort with the audience to do that.
Interesting. Eric, he's definitely awake and caffeinated. Eric Fuller, all the way from California, asks, frequent flyer programs change the way consumers planned their travel. Interesting, planning. Shouldn't we focus on similar retention programs to develop and hold on to patrons? That's a really good one there, Eric. What do you think of that one, Cara?
I love that. One of my favorite things has been, I get very geeky about our clients and some of the stuff they're doing and watching what they're doing to keep their audiences, keep their customers engaged with them as venues while we're in this interval period. I think the venues who have created these loyal audiences are going to come through this in one of the best ways. One of our clients, there's an organization called Inverness, Scotland. They have been one of my favorites. The Blumenthal Theater in North Carolina, that's another one who's done some really, really cool things to keep their audiences engaged while we're going through this. And I think as you continue to provide offerings to reward and appreciate your loyal audiences, you're going to keep them engaged. So I love it. I think it's a great idea, Eric.
Superb. Eric, thanks for that. Another one from Peter here, 4 thumbs up he's got on this one. We like to run a kind of democracy on these webinars. Peter asks, airlines and hotels have become more flexible on refunds and exchanges, which gives customers confidence to book in advance. Are you seeing venues make their policies more prominent and flexible to bring back that booking confidence? Because, you know, I'm being told that we can travel, you know, and I want to get to see my my in-laws over in Florida, and I'm worried because I'm going to pay £500, you know, £1,000 for a ticket and not be able to get it back when the flight's cancelled because of things moving. So are you hearing of more flexible terms from customers? I am actually. I'm hearing it quite a bit, and it's. I'm also hearing a lot of discussion around that in some of the discussion boards that I'm on in social media. I think it's something that's going to be very important for us to do. I think the other opportunity too is things like Booking Protect. We're hearing a lot more interest from our clients in offering something like that to help get the patrons past this fear of purchase when they're months out. So I agree with you. I think it's gonna be really important that we clearly publish what the refund policies are, that they become very open. And I love this idea of, you know, making that insurance, you know, that assurance of having something like Booking Protect available, that if the patron does get sick and they can't use their ticket, that they are confident they're going to get a refund. And I think that'll help us to get people to start buying again. I get that with refund protection brackets. Other refund protections are available. Sorry, but no, we just like to spread it around. Thank you. No, but seriously, that's if I get sick. But what happens if, you know, I book for, you know, your theatre now, and then the government locks down, or, you know, provincial government in Canada locks down the state, you know, or province, and then the theatre can't happen. It's not. I don't think the refund protection folks are going to give me the money back for that. It's because you're holding on to my money. So have you seen that kind of shift at all? Sorry. I can't say that I have. I'm not sure. Sorry. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. Thanks for that, Peter. Thank you. That's your 2 questions. You're banned now for the rest of the Q&A. Right. We've got 7 to get through, so we better pick it up a bit at the pace. Chuck Miller asks, did you ask about mandatory temperature checks and health screening at the door? Chuck, I am looking through the survey responses right now, and I don't see it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm correct. So I'm not seeing it right now, but we did also, we left an open-ended question at the end to say, what are you most, you know, what, do you have any recommendations to help you feel more comfortable? So with the team that did the deeper analysis on the survey, they may have a response to that from the open-ended questions. And you're putting that up on the Audience View website when it's ready? Yeah, within the next 2 weeks, yeah. Brilliant, brilliant. I snuck ahead of them, sorry guys. You leaked it. I did. Don't tell. Okay. At the end of I'm scanning through the other question. I'm just scanning through the other questions and seeing what I want to pick out on next. Actually, Chuck Miller, brackets from Kansas. He clarifies here. When you asked the question of masks, was it mandatory or optional? Would you come with a mask if it was mandatory or optional? It was mandatory. Yes, okay. Mandatory mask for all attendees, and it was highly supportive. That was our #1 most highly supported, and hand sanitizer was #2. Excellent. Burns SJ, so I'm assuming it's an S Burns is your username. At the end of the show, how do we combat an audience natural instinct to get up and leave all at the same time? Which Billy Partridge adds a comment announcement before the end of the show, that aka kind of like a boarding card handed to the entry, so in asking them to wait to their call. That's really interesting. But I mean, I've been on planes that of very small regional planes, because they've said it might tip over if we all get up together, and said genuinely, rows 16 through 30, you can now get up.
Yeah.
So I just think it's that maybe the trouble we're going to struggle with these kind of things is the natural etiquette, good or bad, that, you know, I can arrive at 10 minutes to curtain up, or 10 minutes to kick off, or first pitch, you know, and the minute I'm ready to go, I can go to beat the rush at the bar, or, you know, get the next train or bus home. So, you know, taking that question and adapting it slightly, do you think we're going to have a big etiquette problem?
I think we could.
Change of behavior.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think there's going to be, needs to happen with it. Again, talking to our clients, I've heard a couple different ways people are looking at this. One of the clients that I interviewed said that what they're doing is they're making absolutely every door available. So it's not, you know, and they're saying they want people to be able to get out of the venue and, you know, go through the side door if they go into the alley, if they go into, you know, they've pointed to all kinds of exits, all kinds of emergency exits, and they're having them open at the end of the show to facilitate people leaving the building in as quickly as they possibly can. I've also heard from clients talking about using their ushers to control the crowd to leave. So they'll make the announcement and say, you know, follow the ushers only in, and they'll let the back 2 rows up and they exit, and they let the next 2 rows up and they exit. Obviously that slows down the exit time, but those are 2 strategies that I've heard.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Burns SJ, for that. I just saw one on digital ticketing here. I'm just trying to find it in the list, which is from Tony. And Tony asked, pre-COVID, you could fly abroad without a piece of paper. How are venues managing ticketing digitally? And he follows up with, to clarify, are there any examples of venues who are dealing with the process of buying, pre-ordering, right through to attending completely ticketless and digitally and contact-free?
I don't have any examples off the top of my head. I'm sure it's happening. I know that I'm not trying to make this into a software pitch. I know within our software we can facilitate that. But I think I'd need to do some outreach to find out who's doing it and get some examples from our clients. Okay,
superb. We'll pass that one on. Thank you, Tony, for that question. Indeed, down to 3. So if you want to get a question in, we're going to have time to get a few more in. Kenny, top of the pile, up in. Last time I spoke to him, he was in Glasgow, Scotland. Over the last few weeks, we've talked about a lot on how we can protect audiences. And that's just, I think Kenny's summing up, because he's been on quite a few of these webinars, and we've talked about audience opinion, audience focus, audience protection. So guess this is where you're going, Kenny. What about staff, ushers, box office? There's bound to be some anxiety in these teams. Have you seen or heard anything from your exposure over in North America of venues who are doing stuff to protect that? Kenny, I think it's a great question, because I really thought that you touched on the staff having on that plane coming back from Florida with masks, but it's not just masks and hand sanitizer. We've seen some terrible examples in the UK of people being, spat at, and people who've been in public service roles have been exposed and caught this. So how do we protect our box office staff?
So again, one of the clients that I talked to, all of their staff are wearing masks and gloves. They have no evening of show box office, so everything is being done with virtual tickets. What they're also doing, instead of having people take tickets or scan, they're creating a list of, now it's a smaller theater. It has, it's 520 seats regularly, and with their reduced seating, they said 136. So what they're doing is they're actually producing a list of attendees, and they're just having people say their names, and they're checking them off the list as they arrive, which I thought was interesting and creative. It could be a bit slow for entry, but I thought that was an interesting way for them to do that. Is they're absolutely requiring that everyone wears masks. If somebody shows up without one, they're not allowed in without it. So they will have some extras. So I thought that was interesting as well. I'm flipping through my notes to see if they have any more ideas on what they were doing with their staff that I can share with you.
Why doing that? I think that's important as well. That going back to Tony's question about the contactless and hate to say it, removing the box office. The box office is dead, or shut. But the fact if we're moving to to digital purchase, digital delivery, redemption, and even I've seen a few things on LinkedIn and other sources about pedal stool scanners. So they're not even holding a scanner. So you walk past a scanning point and you scan your digital ticket. So I think that, and Leon puts in a good point there about backstage crew and confined space and performance. I think we're going to need to be a lot better on some of those things, not just the audience, even though that's where a lot of us focus our thoughts. Couple more questions before we wrap up. Here we go. Offering services in advance, such as programs by digital, would have an impact on the customer's experience and potentially reduce the time customer spends at a theatre, i.e. resulting in less bar sales. Good point, that, Anonymous. The dwell time, we all people spend more, but of course if our bars are closed, we're not going to have that chance. But very good point there. If live theatre isn't possible due to COVID, how can we help to increase merch sales if the show has to be live streamed? I mean, an interesting one. We've seen lots of examples of donations from some theatres and some international companies in Europe who've done live stream, then asked for a donation. But how suddenly we're being asked to become experts in merchandising linked to a digital event. So any ideas on that, Car? Anything you've seen that you thought has been nice? Anything you've seen streamed with a merchandise offering attached to it?
I'm seeing lots of clients selling streaming and then selling the merchandise as standalones as well. I couldn't tell you what their pickup rate is on that. I think it's having that standalone, having that kind of mini store within your website might be a way for you to get that out. And I've seen people doing that, but I don't know what their take rates are on it.
Yeah, and I just wonder that I bought some terrible tat at shows and gigs because I've been there and caught up in the excitement of the gig. I'm not sure I'd go home and buy the same t-shirt. So it's a good point there about making the best possible opportunity to maximise revenue. Billy Partridge asks, is there any work being, it's a product question, so get your product head on. Is there any work being done on Audience View or other system providers, and I'll take the other system providers part, around intelligent seat selection for social distancing? Blocking out seats is fine if you're going to reconfigure your auditorium, but surely it'd be a better way to have it automatically create space around customers, particularly with guidelines changing. And I was going to answer, but Peter, I answered, the man with all the answers, jumps in and says, Monad and Enliven. And I've seen quite a few others, Billy, who've put some real smart thinking into social distancing. The Monad one I particularly like, which has got some configurations in it, if I remember correctly, seeing a demo of it, where you could say it's a 2 or 3 meter kind of exemption, and you buy 6 seats and it draws a pattern around. So that's a good one to have a look at. And live, and I've seen, is the smart seating something? I mean, you've got a lot of products in your range now. Is smart seating one of the things that you're working on? Because we had a conversation before we came on air talking about some of the features you have been working on or releasing. What's been the priority from your customers about what they're actually asking for?
I would love to answer this intelligently, and I'm not sure I can. This is what I'm admitting as a marketer, and I'm clearly not close enough to the product. I know that I do have clients that are using existing functionality to manage their space intelligently within the venue. I think the challenge for ticketing software as a whole, and I'm, hopefully not unfairly speaking for the industry, ticketing software was designed to fill in spaces between people. So we're asking it to do the exact opposite of what the natural programming of this software was. So it's definitely, I can see how it's a challenge for any software company to make that work. I'm not speaking for Audience View. I can't actually tell you what is on the roadmap, and I apologize for not having prepped that and done more research on that in advance. But I know that we will be communicating some new features. There's some new stuff that we're actually putting out today for colleges and universities, and we're going to continue to release information on those and everything that we're bringing to life in the next couple of weeks.
I did actually have a press release come through on that while we were doing this webinar, so it's now in my inbox. Thank you, mate. I'll have a look at that in a minute.
Excellent.
One last question from Chuck Miller, and it's a long one, so I haven't read it. So here we go. We're looking at a complete system by calling agents first, confirming your willingness to travel, cleansing backstage like we would the house, opening more dressing rooms. Constant and visible during shows, ensuring our vehicles and hotels are up to specs. All catering comes in packages. Social distance crew, stage entrance, backing up front line of stage by 15 feet. Asking managers what will make artists more comfortable. No more meet and greet. ... And it's great that venues are doing this, but one of my things I put in my notes in case we didn't get any Q&A was this, and I wrote down on my pad in front of me. Cost to adapt, ROI, reusability. Now, I know we're going to have to do this, but I just wonder, and let's hope we find a vaccine for this thing or it magically goes away, but are we running against the tide here and we're going to spend thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of pounds just to get some people to come back? But then you look at other people who are making the very hard decision. I can see a few of them on here who their venues have announced they're closed till October or November. Are we better not, I hate to say it, wasting that money of trying to reopen? On a cheerful final question.
But I do appreciate, like, Chuck, what you're talking about here, the level of thought that you put into it and checking through each of the elements. I think that's going to help. I think that's a really positive step in showing the care that you have for your audiences and for your cast and your crew. So that's great. Yeah,
thanks for that, Chuck. And it echoes what other people have said in the Q&A. It's not just about the audience; it is about our staff, and those of us who manage or are part of teams, we all want to see the best for our colleagues. Look, it's an on-time arrival. We're arriving 2 minutes early at our final destination. Just before everyone who's here nips off, tomorrow, really good session. No benefits, no problem about memberships who can't maybe fulfill all those benefits of. And then the project managers get to work, as they always do on a Thursday afternoon, talking about how to manage some projects where we're in lockdown. All that remains is for me to say a huge thank you for taking that piece of work and adding to it, Cara. It's superb.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to everyone who is attending. Yes, a recording is available for those just jumping in the Q&A. It will be on our website and on our YouTube channel from later on this afternoon. Thank you very much, Cara, and good afternoon, good morning to all of you here, and have a great rest of your day.